this is your time to bow out if you don't feel like you want to follow rules.
Yeah. We're supposed to be going on our road trip in September, but we're going to rethink that at the end of August. Might have to get postponed for the third time.
We backed out of our trip at the end of this month.
Did you? Not going to Texas, huh?
Nope.
How's Brian's shoulder?
Recovery is a little rough. Thank you for asking.
Ow, huh?
Yeah. For those who don't know, my husband had shoulder surgery end of last week.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Nolip, how are things?
She texted me earlier and indicated something about tomorrow night, but there was no reference to tonight, so I would assume she's planning to attend.
So just signed in. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Councillor Shaw. Mike, are you indicating we are like ready to go, like we're broadcasting ready to go, or? All right, I will call this Tigard City Council meeting to order. City Recorder Krager, please call roll.
Councillor Shaw. Here. Mayor Snyder.
Here.
Youth Councillor Nog.
Here.
Councillor Goodhouse.
Here.
Councillor Newton.
Here.
Council President Lube.
Here.
All right, thank you, City Recorder. Let's move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'd ask Mr. Nolip to put the flag up on the screen and mute yourselves, and then participate in the pledge. All right, thank you, Mr. Nolip. Let's see, we are going to move on to any non-agenda items from staff or council.
None from us, Mr. Mayor.
All right, we'll move on to public comment. Assistant City Manager Nyland, do you have any follow-up on previous public comment?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. We did not have a council meeting last week as it was National Night Out. And fun fact, every year on the first Tuesday in August, the United States and Canada celebrate National Night Out Day. Residents, organizations, and police departments join hands to enhance the relationship between neighborhoods and communities. So start preparing for National Night Out on August 2nd, 2022. That's my report.
Thank you. We'll move on to an update from Chief McAlpine on the July police activity and statistics.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Chief Kathy McAlpine. I'm trying something a little different tonight, so hopefully it works since my internet has been spotty through most of my Teams meetings this evening. So you won't see me, but we'll put up my highlighted PowerPoint to give a visual. Again, as you said, Mayor, this is the July dashboard. And what I think Mike's going to put it up here now. What I wanted to highlight really is pertinent to maybe a later discussion we're going to have on issues that are facing downtown, some of our homelessness challenge, and just really painting a picture of where we sit staffing wise, especially in light of the levy funding. As you know, we have hired all 9 levy officers, and they're in various parts of training. Some of them are on their own now, but we also have 3 other vacancies due to retirements or lateraling to another agency. And so what we've been really hit in July and August is just a variety of FMLA, military, and then a lot of either on the job or off the job injuries that have lasted several months. So as you can see, we have about 11 personnel that are in various stages of not being on their own and not counting in our staffing. And you see when we're trying to account for the number of shifts conducted at minimums, for the month of July, we were above 50% on all 3 shifts. And in days and swings, we were well into the 60%. And so it really does stretch us as far as some emphasis that we can do when we're really kind of fighting to just staff our streets. We have had to delay expanding our minimum staffing that was going to happen in July, and now we will wait till September when we hope to get more officers either healthy and or on their own from the training program. And with that, if you allow me to just kind of shift gears and be relevant for tonight, I don't have a PowerPoint, but in your packet that you saw, we are seeing an increased calls for service overall for 2021, not necessarily for July. But on the 4th page, when we talk about behavioral health incidences, we still are at the 65% overall that have some sort of mental health, houselessness, and or substance disorders. And of that, we know that 238 calls, 185 have either behavioral health or a known transient of 116. So again, I think that's going to be relevant for tonight's conversation and the current concerns you're hearing in the community. Why those numbers don't add up, the 185 and 116, as you all know, you can have both a BHI and a transient, so some of those are duplicates. And last is to put in perspective, so for the month of July in downtown corridor, we had 31 priority 1 or 2. So those are immediate or emerging calls for service in the downtown area. And there are over 300 other calls that are low priorities, and those can be duplicate, multiple callers, and those are self-initiated that still have not been vetted because we just started that deeper dive today. But again, want to give you a few numbers as we continue to have a conversation later on in our agenda. And lastly, I'll close with what's real important is still tracking when we can have our 40 hours of advanced crisis intervention and de-escalation. As you know, that's been put off because of COVID, because that does require role playing and kind of hands-on. So we have 6 officers assigned in September to go to the Washington County training. And then we'll have 2 other officers because Clackamas County is hosting, and that'll be in October. And then we are hosting the training ourselves in Washington County here in Tigard in January. We get 4 slots. We don't get additional just because we're the host. So we will start seeing some progress on that advanced training. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Questions or comments from the council? All right, Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 2 things, Chief. First of all, I was interested in a little bit, if you could brief us a little bit more about what you're talking about in terms of the downtown calls. Is that something you're trending, trying to think about a strategy to address generally? That's my question. And then the second question, when we were at National Night Out, the mayor and Council President Lube and I, Commander McDonald made an announcement about some recognition that you received at an FBI training. And if you're comfortable sharing about that, I think that would be interesting to hear more about. So those are my 2 questions. Thanks.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. The downtown focus is really, I believe, relevant to what communications that all of you are receiving, the city manager has, I personally as well, regarding mental health, houselessness issues, but really concerned about the livability of their patrons or businesses. And so it was an opportunity to put it in context. I did look at the 31 calls. Again, that was just done this evening. And those are a lot of people exhibiting concerning behaviors, walking around with perceived to be weapons and things of that nature. So I think the timing is appropriate for what we're hearing from our community. And then as far as the award, yes, there's a sense of pride. I'm more than happy to share. So one section, so this is, was the honor of representing the state of Oregon in the FBI leagues. That's the law enforcement executive directors. Those are police chiefs and sheriffs for agencies with 500 sworn officers or lower. And one of the sections was strategic planning. And without any notice of ours, the instructor had gone to all of our different agencies' websites to see how transparent we are, a certain criteria. He showed the PowerPoint on the 20-point criteria, and he said that there was one agency that was 20 out of 20. And then he walked up to me and gave me an FBI coin and said, "Congratulations, Tiger, hit it out of the park." And so I've had a lot of calls from chiefs and sheriffs since then, but I quickly, shared that because as we all know, you can put that in motion, but if you don't have the people believing in the vision and carrying that out, we wouldn't be where we are. And so it was nice to share from a team's perspective. So thank you for asking.
Kudos to you and the whole team. Thanks.
And Chief, would there be any way that the criteria for that, I assume that's publicly available. Is there a way that could be shared with us so we could just sort of recognize what is special in our community and what we did without being told we should?
Yeah, well, I can give you, because I took a picture of the slide that he had his 20-point, so there's not a definition, so it may or may not be obvious what those sections are because I don't have them memorized, but I would be more than happy to send it to all of you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor. I was actually going to ask the exact same question, and congratulations to the chief. It was exciting on National Night Out to have all your staff just cheering you on. So thank you so much.
And Councillor Newton, I guess I will just add a bit to what Chief McAlpine was saying to respond. Around the concerns in downtown, as she stated, there are just a lot of concerns about homeless individuals, houseless individuals, and folks with mental health, apparent mental health concerns and substance use issues, primarily from businesses, but also from residents of downtown. And I spent multiple hours on the phone today connecting with concerned business owners and just really hearing the details. And I think we'll discuss this, but from my perspective and some of the feedback I've given both the chief and Library Director Bernard is that we need to be escalating the speed at which we're responding, and frankly probably need a short-term plan that may become the focus to try to address those concerns in a compassionate way, but making sure that we're maintaining the livability and the vitality of downtown. It's a difficult balance. I'm kind of providing that context now in part because I know we're going to have a topic later tonight that is directly related to this. So I just want to add that. And the chief was being very kind, but I think I, lit a little bit of a fire under everybody's bum related to this earlier today. So hopefully that's helpful. Any other comments or questions on the chief's report? All right, the Tigard area, thank you very much, Chief. And we'll move on to next item on the agenda. It looks like the Tigard Area Chamber of Commerce report has been rescheduled to August 24th. Public comment, written public comment. City Recorder Krager, we did not, from what I saw, we did not get any official written public comment, but I would also, again, recognize the voluminous amount of communication we've gotten in the last week or so, actually more like 2 weeks related to concerns in downtown that I was just referencing. But am I correct that we didn't have any other written public comment?
Yes, you are. We did not receive more.
All right. If anyone wishes to make any phone-in public comment, you may do that by calling the following phone number, 503-966-4101. Those with general comments should call in now. Callers wishing to testify about agenda item number 6 should call at the beginning of that public hearing. Mr. Nolep, do we have any callers in the queue?
Mr. Mayor, at this time, there are no callers in the queue.
All right, please let me know if that changes. We'll move on to council liaison reports. We'll start with the first discussion here, which is, I think everybody's had a heads up on, and both in the meeting and then from the city manager. I have communicated with Youth Councilor Nog. She does wish to have an advisory vote whenever we can allow her to do so, and we would have her vote first. As the roll call vote is being taken, or as a vote is being taken, if we ever return to in-person meetings and don't do roll call votes all the time, we'll have to, I'm just realizing we'll have to work that detail out, but for now, that wouldn't be an issue. So wanted to get people's feedback about that and any concerns. I know that the city attorney may want to make some or provide some input on any concerns there that she may have as well. So council thoughts on that? Councilor Goodhouse.
I don't have a problem with the advisory vote. My only thought would be is to do the same rotation though as a roll call. I think we do that on purpose to rotate it around so that way we don't get a feel of how everyone is weighing in on a topic. So that my only part would be.
I think it's fine to have the rotating roll call vote for everybody that's elected, but it would make no sense to have Youth Councilor Nog vote last as an advisory vote. So from my perspective, if we were going to do it, we would have her vote called first, and then everybody else's vote called in rotation as it is now.
Okay, I was just thinking that because I think right now when we do the attendance, we rotate that, and then I think she's called last, but maybe put her in the cycle of rotating it so it's just different points of voting. Even the even her vote would be rotated around. It's just my 2 cents.
Okay, just so I'm clear, do you understand what my concern is about that rotating like that? That she doesn't, because she doesn't have a formal vote, if she doesn't vote early on and people want to know what her thought was, no one would have heard her vote until they've already voted. That's the concern.
Yeah, I get that, but I think a vote's different than feedback on a topic. So,
all right, Council President Lube, anything?
No comments. I understand both points of view, but I think because it's an advisory vote that, Youth Councilor Nog would go first. I would also hope that we would have robust discussion and she actively participates. And so it's not a surprise vote that we can't stop and ask her more about. So I just want to encourage Youth Councilor Nog to really make sure if, you feel very strongly about something, to make sure we know about it during the process. But that would be my only request. And I'm excited.
We did have that discussion, or she and I had that discussion. I even shared with her that if there was a surprise that we weren't expecting, we might ask more questions before we continued the vote. But I think she understood and plans to continue to participate as she already has been very robustly. So Councilor Newton, anything?
Not really. I concur with you, Mr. Mayor. I think our votes are recorded and they're the legal vote, if you will. So I think having Councilor Nog go first is a good idea. She doesn't strike me as shy, so I'm not really worried about her telling us what she thinks ahead of time. And I saw the comments that the city attorney made, and my background, working with council for years, I understand that there may be some votes that it would probably not be appropriate, but I think we just want to be really clear about that up front. So that's my comments.
Okay, thank you. On that point, I think that opens up a good discussion. Then we'll go to Councilor Shaw. But on that point, I guess I'd like the city attorney to weigh in on. I guess in my mind, I'm not sure having an advisory vote is a whole lot different than voicing verbal feedback during a process too. I mean, the impact or effect of her or whoever the youth counselor is in the future saying, you know, they don't support something versus voting no seems very similar. So I guess I want to understand if there really is a distinction, or do you literally have concern about the youth counselor's participation in any quasi-judicial public hearing?
No, my concern was really focused on the advisory voting, just because it's such a procedurally scripted process under Oregon State Land Use Law that, frankly, I just prefer not to have to address that in case that issue should come before LUA. So that was my preference with that. So no, I have no concerns with participation, just the formal voting.
All right, so Youth Counselor Nog, are you okay with this? With the sort of caveats and concern the city attorney has, and do you think that's adequate that you voice and participate, but maybe not vote in those things she had concerns about?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Definitely, we wouldn't want this to turn into a full like legal mess, I guess. And I think those are very good concerns. And I understand that. I mean, some land use agreements, I probably wouldn't even have the most knowledge to make an informed vote in the first place. So some of the topics are understandable.
Thank you. Counselor Shaw.
Yeah, my only question is going to be to Youth Counselor Nog, and just to find out if she's okay with going first. And if, it sounds like she is, and give her the opportunity to say yes, but I have no concerns. And believe City Attorney Rahala has addressed the couple that I would have had.
All right, Youth Counselor Nog, it looked like you were nodding your head yes to Counselor Shaw.
Yes, Counselor Shaw. I am excited and pumped for this opportunity. And I would like to thank you guys for having this opportunity exist in the first place.
All right. I heard consensus to move forward with this process, and also sounded like most people were supportive of her advisory vote happening first. City Recorder Krager and or City Manager Reimer or City Attorney Rahala, anything further on this?
Only that we will plan to implement on the meeting on the 24th of this month. And so we'll put this in motion. And if there's any questions that Youth Counselor Nog has for any of us, please reach out and let us know. So thank you.
All right, we have some time for some additional board and committee liaison reports. Council President Lube, anything you want to report on?
No, I just want to say that National Night Out was a great event, and it was really a wonderful opportunity to be outside in the fresh air with a lot of our community members and reach them in a way I don't think we've been able to in the last year and a half. And special kudos to our police officers who were out there, and we had a few detectives. It was really wonderful to be able to talk with them and listen to their answers. And we saw a couple of the body cameras in action, and we were discussing it, and held one. Turns out they're not that heavy. They're a little big, but they're not that heavy. So it was just a really great opportunity, and wanted to call that out.
Thank you. Councilor Newton.
Yeah, National Night Out was great. It was really great to get out there and connect with the community. I really enjoyed it. A couple of other quick things. A Public Safety Advisory Board met last night, and I just wanted to give a shout out to the chief and Representative Graber. They did a really great job going over the legislation that was just approved by the state legislature regarding public safety issues. So kudos to them. They did a great job answering the questions, and it'll be helpful as the Public Safety Advisory Board moves forward. Earlier, it was last week, I guess, the Community Roundtable met, and we had a good discussion about the ARPA funding, and I asked the groups to let us know if they had concerns regarding some of the folks they serve getting through COVID and getting through to the other side. So I'll share a little bit about that when we get to that discussion. And the Lake Oswego Tigard watership draft agreement is over to our colleagues at Lake Oswego. So we have an agreement that Councilor Goodhouse and I worked with City Attorney Rahala and Brian Reger and Steve Reimer and John Goodrich before he left, and it's over there. And we will meet as an oversight committee to finalize the draft before we each get it to our respective councils for review. So we're excited to have that moving along. So that's all I have.
We look forward to that. Youth Councilor Nog. Anything you want to report?
Haven't been that much going on with Tiger Youth Advisory Council. We are planning on doing a Parks and Rec youth-oriented cleanup late August, where there will be games and hopefully snacks, and we are just going to try and clean up the parks a bit.
I will also add to her report out that she presented myself with a robust set of community information that she collected feedback from about 70 plus youth members of our community over a couple week period of time. And I'll be sharing that with each of you and talking about it with each council member as we're having our one-on-ones. I just want to recognize Youth Councilor Nog for that very useful information that's already been shared with the city manager and staff, but she both collected the information, summarized it, and then came up with an action plan all before she even presented it to me. So, Councilor Goodhouse.
Unmute button. About the same. National Night Out was a great night. Hit a few of the neighborhoods, ran into Councilor Shaw. So that was a good night. Yesterday, the mayor and I did a tour of the newly renovated Tigard High School. And it's just amazing how the new improvements, what it is, all the different amenities for the students is just amazing. All the different, you hit all the different areas that they need. Even with the automotive, the woodworking, the arts room, all that is just a great facility. But then I think with summer, it's been a little slow with the committee meetings and like that things as well. So, and I did, Mayor, it looked like Mike Nolp's hand raised a little bit ago. I don't know if he had a question or something, but I saw a hand pop up in his name, but I don't know what that was.
We do have a caller in the queue, so after, no hurry, but whenever you're ready for it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. We'll come back to that. Also recognize Youth Councilor Nog was at the high school tour as well. So, Councilor Shaw, anything to share?
Thank you, yes, Mayor. And I'm so disappointed I did not get an opportunity to tour the high school, as our son just graduated from there and hasn't had the opportunity to be in that really gorgeous facility. But would like to echo just the sentiments about National Night Out. It was terrific to see the community, to see the fire department, the police, and everybody, as President Heidi Loop said, enjoying the fresh air. It was really nice to see the community. A couple things. One, the Planning Commission was really perhaps thrilled and honored to have been part of the council meeting a couple weeks ago. They enjoyed the conversation, highlighting kind of what their role is. Perhaps in the future there was some requests if we could help educate them on just what our roles are, how we can better facilitate a dialogue that's they felt a little awkward. They weren't sure if they should have called us by our first name or by our formal names, and so perhaps just in the future we could help ease any anxiety or discomfort they may have. But they were pleased to meet with us and look forward to doing that again. And that is all I have for tonight, Mayor.
Thank you for that feedback, and we'll try to figure out how to make that even better next time. I will just quickly share that at the Region 1 ACT meeting, I brought up and made a push for 99W and Dave Roth, and I guess we sent the letter that I think you all saw. What I wanted to share is that at the actual meeting, we got some pretty strong feedback and response that basically the project doesn't meet what the criteria are that the state is looking to spend the money on in that category. So we were told it wasn't a good fit and would not likely be funded or competitive. And so it's not likely to move forward with any additional staff work in that specific program. There's no one that's saying it's a bad project or that it shouldn't happen or anything else. It was just, not the right match for the criteria. So that's the one update I want to give you. And then Mr. Nolop, let's go back to the caller. Is this a caller who's wanting to make general comments, or do you know? Thank you.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hi, how's it going? This is Mike Miller and Untitled Tap House.
Hi, Mike. Mayor Snyder here. Good to talk to you again today. You are speaking to the whole city council. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah, I guess I'm listening to what's happening tonight. It sounds like there's lots of calls and concerns of business owners as well as people that live in the community that are concerned about the homeless. The tents and the garbage filling up on the sidewalk and the destruction of property. And for myself, I'm just watching it, Tiger kind of, in my mind, kind of falling to pieces here. I'm watching tents go up. I'm watching damage to my property. I've had somebody walk in our building and throw a sign on the ground. I had a person stand on a table after hours and ran through the back of one of our pods that we built. I've had people knock over potted plants that walking through looking crazy. I've had people screaming and obscenities on our street and walking right in front of our business. And one lady had an axe in one hand and a saw in the other. And it's so aside from the business part of it, which is affecting us, our female employees are scared to stay late and they do not want to close by themselves, let alone even work there. They're actually going, I don't know if this is the right place for me. So, I mean, I'm just naming a few examples. I've sent pictures of all of these things I'm talking about right now. And it's getting to the point where it's getting really bad, from my perspective, to the point where businesses are starting to think, hey, let's get out of here. Living in this area, we actually have the guy who was in front of the Tiger Library in his tent. Just the other day, walked by with no shirt on, ripped up whatever, walking past our house, directly in front of our house on Hill Street, with my daughter playing outside, and that's not okay. So we're at the point now where it's not just business, it's personal. And I'm wondering what is the timeline and what is going to be actually done to fix this right away, but not in a month or two, but like in a week or two. What's going to happen?
Thank you, Mike, for that.
I think the biggest point, sorry to talk over you. The biggest point is that we see downtown Portland. We saw what happened to it. Nobody in their right mind wants to really go to downtown Portland anymore because it's scary. We have people that actually are looking for employment here in Tiger because they left downtown Portland. The gentleman Brendan from a liquor store said he left his business in downtown Portland to come to Tiger because of the homeless people, and now he's seeing the same thing. So I'm just wondering how we're going to avoid doing the same thing that downtown Portland is. Tiger is becoming downtown Portland, and that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Miller, for your testimony, and know that based on our conversation earlier today and the conversations I then had with staff in the middle of the day, and I think other counselors are having, along with the topic that's about to be on our agenda, you can trust that we're going to be acting quickly. I think the staff understands the urgency. I know we have basically canceled next week's council meeting. I think we may need to revisit that decision after our discussions. I don't know whether things can be prepared by then to have a meaningful meeting, but City Manager Reimer, that's something that perhaps you and Chief and Director Bernard may want to think about that a little bit as to whether we could have useful conversation and or do some work as quickly as next week with the time that we had indicated we were going to cancel. You don't necessarily have to respond to that now, but just as a thought. Thank you, Mr. Miller, for your testimony, and we will move on to item number 4 on our agenda, which is to receive a briefing on the Washington County Encampment Pilot Program. Director Bernard.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members, fellow Tigard teammates, and members of our community. My name is Halstead Bernard. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the director of the Tigard Public Library. I'm speaking with you tonight not as the library director, but as the project lead for City Council Goal 1. And for those of you who aren't on a first number basis with City Council goals, City Council Goal 1 is to implement an actionable, person-centric regional response to homelessness so that Tigard can become a community that offers safe housing options for everyone. As city teammates began our urgent work on this goal, we were approached by Washington County to talk with us about their Encampments pilot program. By partnering with the county, we have an immediate opportunity to improve coordination and communication between departments, cities, special districts, and our communities across the county in how we address homeless encampments. I am pleased to introduce Josh Kreitz. Josh is the Assistant Director of the Washington County Department of Housing Services, and he will present the goals and outcomes of the county's pilot program. There will be time for your questions and comments at the end of his presentation. Thank you.
Well, good evening, Mayor Snyder and Council. It's great to be back with your council this evening. Just again, for the record, my name is Josh Kreitz. I'm the Assistant Director of the Housing Department. I use he, his, him pronouns. I'm also joined by my colleagues, Marty Kyle, who's our Director of Health and Human Services. And if I thought I had a busy job, all I have to do is look at Marty right now. And also our Undersheriff, John Cook. I also just want to mention that in our audience this evening is Chair Harrington from our Washington County Board of Commissioners, I think listening in. And Commissioner Rogers also wanted us to mention that he apologizes he can't attend this evening, but I think he's getting ready for a well-deserved time away. If you could please bring up the PowerPoint, that would be great. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. So what we want to do this evening is just take a brief amount of time and give you an overview of this 12-month encampment program. And so tonight we're really going to be looking at some of the fundamental policies that we've developed, look at some of the background for why we got to where we're at right now, talk about some of the really interesting services and tools that are part of this, talk about a little bit how we see the budget and how we've kind of proposed this program, and some of the really key discussion points that as we engage with our jurisdictional partners that are just really cogent for this. Next slide, please. So one of the questions that we've been getting asked quite a bit is like, what was the purpose of this 12-month encampment program? And really, it's to improve that coordination, not only internally with all of our departments within Washington County, but also with our jurisdictional partners, with our special districts, and just really think about these issues around our community and homelessness and encampments. And just, you know, listening to the lead and to this presentation, Mayor and Council, it's so obvious how much homelessness is affecting our community. It's not just the community that's being affected, but the folks who are living in this state, which is also, you know, many times it's not meant for human habitation, right? So we really have been working over the course of the last several months on developing this 12-month program for unincorporated Washington County. But at the same time, we're looking for an opportunity to partner with our jurisdictions on providing this support over the next 12 months, because we realize, again, as we've heard into the lead-in, that all of our jurisdictions are really feeling this. This is a county-wide problem. This is a regional problem. This is a state of Oregon and a West Coast problem. And one thing that we're really trying to focus on, Mayor and Council, is that opportunity to leverage this 12 months as a learning experience. This is the first time that Washington County has put some real rigor and rules and policy around a homeless encampment program. And so this gives us an opportunity to really learn, to inform, what do we want to do moving forward after 12 months? And what does that look like? Next slide, please. So the background on this is not going to come as any surprise to your council. We've just seen a significant increase in homeless encampments throughout all of Washington County, incorporated, unincorporated, all throughout. And what we're really all trying to do, when I hear your council speak, I had the opportunity to speak with another council yesterday, is we're all trying to strike that right balance, right, of getting the provision of humane services to our homeless community, while also thinking about what's the livability of our community, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. One thing that I could say from a public health standpoint, and Marnie's here, and we'll have, she'll be talking soon, is that we've also seen a low COVID vaccination uptake rate with our homeless population. We've done some vaccination clinics, but we've seen that, so we understand there's a public health, many public health kind of strings to this. And I think one thing that's just really interesting to mention here is we've developed this program. We've been collaborating on this for the last several months. And I had a colleague in another community ask me, you know, what would you do if you didn't have this program? We were running this program with or without it being formalized. Staff have spent significant amounts of time on homeless encampments. And I know that all of our jurisdictional partners are having the same discussions, spending a lot of time and a lot of resources. Next slide, please. So this slide, myself and my colleagues, we're going to give an overview of this 12-month encampment. I'm going to talk to some of the points and ask my colleagues, John and Marnie, to join in. But I'll just hit on a couple of the points here around this 12-month program that's being funded with our American Rescue Fund Act. So some of the real benefits to partnering with the county on this is we're going to be able to provide intensive outreach and navigation. And again, that's deploying different resources as we stand up our supported housing services measure on a different division of the housing department. We'll be able to deploy more of those resources, working with existing contractors who are doing the street outreach and navigation, really building out that centralized point of contact. So the county is hiring up for this program. So we'll have somebody who can really help coordinate the communication strategies, both within our department, with our jurisdictional partners, working with our special districts, and everything from helping manage constituent questions and complaints to just standardized, crisp, clear communications around what's happening with encampments, you know, within Washington County, what the approach is, what's happening. And so again, just having that really good centralized point of contact around homeless encampments. And we'll be standing up a webpage and also doing data collection and reporting. So having all of that packaged up, I think, is really important. I'm going to ask my colleague John to talk a little bit about the Hope Deputy that we're bringing into this, and then my colleague Marnie after that to talk about some of the health and safety decisions, our assessment tool, and some of the resources around camp cleanup and support.
Thank you, Josh, and good evening, Mayor and Council members. Thanks for having us here. So the Hope Deputy that we're utilizing is a uniformed homeless outreach, house outreach program and education deputy. And their main goal is to have an eye to public safety, to work with the community and the members living in some of these encampments, and then to also work with our local law enforcement and code enforcement members, because we know a lot of the folks that are living in these houseless communities are transitory, going in and out of different jurisdictions. And we really want to make sure that we're giving consistent messaging and able to get folks the resources that they need, as well as help track some of the calls that come into our dispatch center. And then the last main piece is we do have some folks that are helping with property management. So when we do have to go in to an encampment, we want to make sure that people's property is managed correctly as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Marnie. Thank you.
Marnie, you are muted. I'm sorry.
Somebody had to do that. Good evening, Mayor Snyder and Council. Thanks for having us today to share this opportunity and program. I think, you know, Josh hit on it. This isn't a solution for all homelessness. This is really focused on encampments, and I see it as part of a continuum of services that we're building in Washington County together with our jurisdictional partners and especially with our new permanent supportive housing services. But one of the really unique components of this is an assessment to help us with decisions about health and safety. Because as Josh said earlier, we're trying to balance the needs of the homeless population and approaching it in a humane way. We're approaching a population who is highly unvaccinated against COVID. And so we're concerned that if you just go in and sweep camps and you're just moving people from one place to another place to another place, sort of a whack-a-mole approach to it, then that really increases risk for both the homeless population, but also for the surrounding community. And so we've developed a scored health and safety decision tool that looks at things like reported crime, environmental risk like fires or flooding. It looks at nuisance impacts. Are there large amounts of waste? Environmental impacts, pit latrines, what's happening with the wetlands? Are there rivers nearby? Is there surface water? Those kind of things. High conspicuous drug use. And then also looking at the size of the encampments. So it's really more of a qualitative approach versus just going into where we're hearing the most complaints about, but really having a qualitative approach that guides our decision making about, are we going to support the camp in place because that's the healthiest, safest thing for the campers as well as the surrounding community. And so that would involve things like ensuring sanitary conditions are provided. So it might be bringing in hand washing stations or garbage cans, street or garbage cleanup services, porta potties, those kind of things. And then if the health and safety is above a certain score, then we would make recommendations for camp cleanup. So we're not trespassing. We're actually asking people to take their belongings, their personal effects, so that we can clean the camp so that it's not a health hazard to the campers or the surrounding community. I think, one of the things that we're learning and have anticipated is that oftentimes once the camp is cleaned up, people might come back. And so we will have this cycle of going in and doing the assessment and determining what is the health and safety risk and what can we do to support the camp in a way that maintains their health and safety, but also looks at that community livability and that things are kept clean and contained. And I will turn it back over to Josh. The other thing I guess I'll mention is that we have developed a web page on the county where people can go and report these encampments. So as we build that web page, we plan to have more information about the assessments that have been done, any cleanups that have been done, GPS mapping. And with that, I will turn it back over to Josh.
Yeah, thanks so much, Marnie. I'll ask us to advance to the next slide. We've been asked quite a bit for transparency, just around what does our budget look like and where are we, and it gives you a good idea of where we're putting resources. And you can see that outreach services is a large bucket, code enforcement and public safety. So like cleaning up of camps, coordination, civil deputy, that's another bucket there. And then contracted support is a really large bucket for us. We understand that these camps, when there's significant garbage or other types of bio waste issues, that having a contracted vendors in place is really, really important to this work. And then just making sure that we have the right contingencies in place as we're learning a lot, just like any organization is when they stand up a new program. Next slide, please. I'm going to ask Marnie to kind of come back in because we get asked quite a bit of questions around just what is the criteria for when a camp is going to stay in place and when would a camp be removed. So I'll ask maybe Marnie to talk a little bit more to that because I think that's a pretty cogent point.
Yeah, so what we've done is looked at different assessments throughout the country and in Portland to learn, well, how do other people assess the health and safety of these encampments when trying to make a decision about, do you support them in place or do you need to have people leave and take their personal stuff so that you can clean the encampment. And so we've developed this assessment, and I mentioned some of the things that are on there, such as crimes, garbage pile up, latrines. Is there a risk to the environment? So really looking at human health and public safety. And what we've done is if the risk score is below 50, so it's a 100-point score, and certain criteria is weighted heavier. So crimes are weighted heavier than garbage pile up, just as an example. So if the risk score is under 50, then it's our recommendation to support with sanitation, hygiene, and waste removal. Throughout this process, as Josh said, we have outreach and navigation. So even if it's under 50 and we're providing these kind of supports, we're also providing information about other options so that people can leave these encampments and go to shelters as they're developed or other housing options. If the risk score is between 50 and 75, that means that there's a lot of garbage, there might be crime, there might be conspicuous drug use, there's a lot of concern, and what we do is we post it with a 2-week grace period. And what we've learned from other programs like this is that the campers learn really quickly from the homeless outreach providers and just from being in the area what the criteria is, but we've tried to make it really clear that these are the things that you need to do, and we provide them the support to clean up the garbage and to make some of the changes that need to be made. And so we provide that 2-week grace period, and then we go back and do another assessment. If it continues to score above 50, then we make the recommendation to remove and clean the encampment. And then a risk score over 75 or over 50 after the grace period, we make the recommendation to remove and clean the encampment. In our process, we give a 5-day notice. So we go out and post, and with the sheriff's office and our homeless outreach community-based organizations, we make sure that we're communicating to the campers and posting so that they know what's coming up and they have that sort of 5-day warning period.
Thanks, Marnie.
Marnie, can I ask a question? Isn't there a new, I thought in June, the legislature passed something that now requires a longer posting period.
Right. Well, it doesn't go into effect until next year. I don't remember the exact date, but it doesn't go into effect until next year, but we have built that into this because when we were developing this program, we anticipated that that would pass.
Yeah, that's a really good point and a really good question. Next slide. And I would say one of the benefits of the program too is that we've spent a lot of time with our county council in the last 7 months. There's a lot of legal considerations, which we're having some initial talks with Steve and Kathy and your chief of police around some of the legal things like Martin v. Boise and other court cases. So it's been great to have our county council spending a lot of time with us on what, developing this program. We thought it'd be helpful just to kind of give an example of an encampment in general that scored a 61 on a follow-up after a grace period. So the recommendation for the camp was to really clean the encampment after there was a grace period given. So as you can see, there's a bit of a history there. We utilized the risk assessment. We found that even after doing the grace period, that the site was still at a high enough level that really needed to be cleaned. And it was cleaned starting, that was, I believe, last week. You can kind of see that the team went in. And they also took the time to bag and make sure that they stored any belongings that were left behind, and those were being stored in county facilities and being handled by the sheriff's office. So being respectful of the fact that this is a tough situation. It's a tough situation when you're asking folks who don't have a place to be to go elsewhere. But when it's become such a safety and health and criminal background type of risk, that sometimes is the decision that has to be made. Next slide, please. So there's a lot on this slide. I promise I won't walk through all of it. But what we wanted to do and the conversations that we're starting to have with our jurisdictional partners, there's a lot of key partnership points just for discussion to have. And, you know, as we look to partner with our jurisdictions and with the city of Tigard, there's different things that we understand. As a county, we're not trying to come into any jurisdiction and say, here's our program, let's just implement it. It's really a partnership, and it takes a lot of communication. It takes a lot of coordination. And I think I know from working with my colleagues that we're all up for that. And it's something that excites us to be able to partner and provide support. And that's what we're here as the county to do. So certain things around like code enforcement and law enforcement, we really need to have those ongoing conversations about what that would look like, how we would partner with the city of Tigard's teams, how our county council could partner with your legal teams and have discussions and kind of cross-hibernate like on different ideas about, well, what does Martin v. Boise mean? What does it mean to remove items from a public space? What does it mean, you know, if you were to ask somebody to leave a public space, and just really have those conversations. And then the resources that the county can bring, you know, if a camp needs to be cleaned, we have the contracted support in place. We have the funding in place to do that. We have the policies and procedures in place that things are going to be stored correctly and that things are being done with in accordance to the law when it comes to storing these individuals' property. And if we're going to leave a site in place, and that's an agreement, again, that we need to partner with our jurisdictions on, that we can provide those sanitation. We can provide help with garbage pickup and cleanup in partnership with the city. We can help with the funding. We can help with porta potties, hand washing stations, things of that nature. And then just overall, the communication strategy, you know, we'll have staff in place to really help beef up the communications with our jurisdictional partners, our constituents, and just how do we partner with the city and our other jurisdictional partners on that. So these are just some of the key partnership points. And I think I want to highlight this encampment program, while separate from the supported housing services measure. I think just hearing some of the challenges that the city of Tigard is having, we do want you to know that the supportive housing services measure, which is a separate program being stood up, is really meant to address chronic homelessness with large amounts of permanent supportive housing, large amounts of shelter, and services that meet the needs of the folks who are out there, behavioral health, culturally specific. So that program is in the first stages of being implemented. And I know after Q1, we'll be giving a report to our County Board of Commissioners on the implementation. But I like to say help is on the way in the way of the supportive housing services measure. But this encampment program is something that is targeted right now to deal with encampments. And you know, we're here to partner and communicate and coordinate as much as possible. So I will quit talking, Mayor and Council, and I think the next slide says, you know, what types of questions and concerns that you might have. But thank you for your time this evening.
So Josh, just very quickly, and then we'll go to the council. Looks like they have lots of questions and comments, so we'll go there. But can you just speak to whether the county is prepared? Like, has this been scaled such that if every jurisdiction in the county wanted to participate next week, it's scaled such that the county can handle it? Maybe not from a, I know you may be asking for some support and money and or participation from our policing agencies and perhaps other staff, but is the county ready for this at scale now?
Yeah, that's a really great and reasonable question to be asking. So, and I think Marnie, I saw Marnie unmute herself, so maybe I'll let Marnie jump in.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you know, what I would describe, Mayor Snyder, is that we're building the plane while we're flying it. So we just got approval for this program in July from the board. But in the meantime, we had 3 camps that we couldn't sit around and wait for 6 weeks to finish our hiring process. So right now, I would say we're doing this work by our bootstraps, and we're doing everything that we can to get some staff hired. Once we get staff hired, we believe that we will be at scale to manage encampments throughout the county.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to Councillor Shaw, then Councillor Nog, then Councillor Goodhouse.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I have a number of questions, particularly around like what is, who's the webpage for, what is purpose, but perhaps, Mayor, what we can do, we've had a homelessness task force in the past in the city of Tigard, and I'd recommend we stand that back up and get individuals who can then assist with both Josh and with Marnie, and we can work this problem out as a community, because I do think it's going to take a lot of us to really work through this new 12-month program, but also, just assisting you all in the endeavor you have, which is ambitious, and I applaud that, particularly building it as you're flying it, as you'd say, Marnie. But I think let's get that task force back up and running. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Youth Councillor Nog?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. You mentioned outreach in the slideshow. I think a pretty big part of houselessness is a lack of outreach to the homeless communities itself and asking them what they need. I was wondering if there was planned to do outreach to the homeless population in Tigard.
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. So, Councillor, we've been working on building up this supportive housing services measure, which again, we're happy to come back to your council after we give our quarterly report out to Metro and the board about the implementation. I know last week, I think I saw 10 contracts go out, Councillor, for case management services to bring 40 new staff with our 10 to 13 different providers that we're bringing on board as part of the supported housing services measure. And that really is to do that intensive outreach to our homeless population. And I want to add some nuance there, not just outreach, but also ensuring that we have the right type of outreach, culturally specific outreach, making sure that we're meeting our communities of color where they're at in different populations. There's also a lot of behavioral health considerations. So we're building out multidisciplinary teams with behavioral health specialists that are culturally specific that will allow us to really get in there and engage with our homeless community. And, I've been doing this for a while. Sometimes it takes a lot of engagement. Sometimes we could offer somebody a house and they might tell us thanks, but no thanks. And you engage and engage and engage and get them into services. And that can take months and years. But I think that we're building out that system, Councillor, to really have dozens of new staff at the provider level, not the county level, but provider level doing that work. So thank you for that question.
Councillor Nog, anything further?
No, I just wanted to ask language accessibility for postings. Is that a thing that's already been covered?
Yes, right now we're posting in English and Spanish. We do have a lot, as Josh said, anytime we're going into an encampment, we have outreach staff going in there, the sheriff's department is going in there. So we also have a good idea if we would need other languages, and we would work to make that happen. But right now, it's pretty much English and Spanish that we're posting in.
Councillor Goodhouse.
Yes, and this one's going to be tricky. It's going to be tricky on some issues going forward. But part of this, I'm going to speak as a business owner from downtown. This is great to look at the campus and do some of those things. But I think from business owners downtown, looking at maybe given all this extra funds and time and money to provide these services, or to with the the restrooms or the wash stations, but also looking at what's being done for funds for these businesses that have to replace items that are broken, or for the extra staff, or to clean up restrooms. I've heard of situations where someone may go into a bathroom and they not only they clean themselves, but they use extremely toxic drugs. Well, then they business owners have to pay to have that fixed or inconvenience themselves in their daily business. And that's what I've been hearing down there too, is that there's a lot of, these things happen, but nothing's really been done. They can't do anything. So what's the flip side to help the business or the communities when they're having to clean up their back areas, their front areas? What's going to be done for all those areas, and what's going to be done to kind of progress and work on the issue going forward? And this is where I'll switch to my counselor hat, but I see that we're putting funds here to take care of the problem after the fact. But what are we going to do as a county and a state to start putting money more back into mental health awareness, treatment, and so forth? A lot of these individuals, we have the affordable housing measure bond, we have all these things. They're never going to go to that stage because they have either the mental health or something that we need to have those resources to either help them or to get ahead of the curve and prevent homeless people being there, where we used to have more mental health services. We used to have mental health resources. We used to have the hospitals where they could stay there and get the treatment. We've gone away with that, and now they're on the streets, and now we're trying to figure out how to take care of it after the fact. But all you're doing is just basically putting a Band-Aid on the issue, and there's still that problem that's out there. This is great for a temporary fix, but what are we going to do to get ahead of this curve and get back to where we were, where we actually recognize mental health, actually take care of it, put the resources there, and help out these individuals that they're stumbling around, and it's not humane either to have them see them stumbling around in society this way. My heart breaks when I see someone like that. And if we kind of patch a little bit, and here's a wash station, or here's a porta potty, well, that's not humane to me. We got to go back to actually putting money into mental health services, taking care of people, not even allowing them to get to this point, and get rid of that stigma in society that there's something wrong with mental health. No, if there's something wrong with you, or someone that's got a problem, help them out. But we got to go back to that problem, and we got to figure out what we're going to do to these, as you heard earlier, if you were on, what's happening in the businesses, they're doing, what are we going to do to take care of this, and also make it not look like we're putting on this money to just take care of encampments and let people do there, but then businesses are like, or homeowners, I'm paying my taxes, I'm paying my business taxes, but then all of a sudden here's someone that's, living for free. We're giving, millions and millions of dollars to them. So there's that whole perception out there as well.
I know that Councillor Goodhouse, you raise a bunch of important issues, and I think some of those are on point with the county, and some of them are probably more Tigard-oriented things that we need to solve as a community and as a region. But I guess I want to make sure that there's, I want to give the county team an ability to respond to the points they think kind of they're here to talk about and cover, but then the Tigard staff may need to respond to some of the other issues that have been raised.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'll defer to my colleague Marty on the behavioral health side. That's in her wheelhouse. But I will say, Councillor Goodhouse, that with the implementation of the supportive housing services measure, we're going from last year having around $5 million in funding to have case management, to have permanent housing options, to have shelters to get people inside, and that really intensive case management that needs to take place, to year one, we're estimating around $50 million. So the system of care that we're building up in Washington County, in my professional career working all over the place, I've never seen this level of historic investment in homelessness. And the measure, which is a regional measure, is scaled at around $210 million a year once fully scaled up. So we're going to see this money coming into the region. We're already staffing up. We're already getting contractors and providers out there. So I think that, the answer, the uphill investment is coming. It's going to take a while to get everything implemented, and it won't cure all the problems, but permanent housing with supported services is really the evidence-based solution to hopefully help us get ourselves to a place where the temperature comes down on this. And then I'll turn it back over to my colleague Marnie, who could talk more on the HHS behavioral health side.
Yeah, I think that like Mayor Snyder said, you hit a lot of things right on the nose. This is one of those things that we call wicked complex problem, because there is no simple silver bullet, and certainly working upstream and preventing the mental illness that we're seeing, preventing substance abuse. And to be honest with you, we start those kind of services at birth and even before birth. And we work with schools all the way through adult programs to prevent and address mental illness. There is not enough services in Washington County. There's not enough behavioral services in the United States. Back in the 70s, there was a big change, and we closed all of our mental health institutions. And you're right, people ended up on the streets because we didn't build enough community-based services to replace those institutions. But we've been working to shift that, and the state legislature this year made a significant investment in behavioral health, mental health services. And so I think we will begin to see changes. The other, it's very complex, and I don't mean to take up a lot of your time, but the other piece that is extremely concerning is we are having what I would call a crisis in hiring and finding mental health qualified practitioners. And so we're having to work at the federal level, at the state level, locally, to make sure that we can offer folks that go into that field a living wage, so that they'll come and work with these complex clients. But it's very complex. I think Tigard really took some great steps in adding a mental health response, adding to the mental health response team, because I think that is a really great program that works with local law enforcement to help people connect with services, so that, you know, there's some hope of improving their situation. But you're right, it's very complex, and we need to be working. It is a Band-Aid, and we need to put this Band-Aid on while we're working on these longer term solutions, because it's kind of like, I'm a nurse, so, you know, the first thing you got to do is stop the bleed. And then we got to work on prevention at the same time that we're working on the long-term health solutions. Sorry, it's not the best answer, but it's the honest answer.
And one follow-up, and I don't think I heard a part of it. What, I mean, and you threw out the number of 50 million. What of that, or what plan is there to, you know, for the businesses or the community members or so forth that are being affected by, you know, homelessness or those with mental issues or so forth? What is the plan, or what percentage of that's going to go to those aspects of those
So Councillor Goodhouse, I think that's the part that needs to be directed to our staff, which is what I was going to set. I don't think that's germane to the county discussion, but county staff, do you disagree or agree with that?
I mean, I'll defer to the city of Tigard. I could tell you the SHS measure was approved by voters to focus on permanent housing solutions, and that's where the funds are going to be directed, are on permanent housing solutions and services.
Director Bernard or Chief McAlpine or City Manager Reimer, do you, I mean, I hope that this conversation is being listened to for the context of our Tigard team's work that's upcoming, but I guess, Director Bernard, do you want to address Councillor Goodhouse's comments?
Certainly, I'll do my best. Part of the work that we intend to do at our kickoff team meeting tomorrow is make sure that we are hearing what our community is expressing to us, and some of those community members include business owners in downtown Tigard and throughout Tigard. So we will be reaching out to them for some listening sessions and trying to figure out what is going to be next, what we can support immediately. We are hearing loud and clear that there is an urgent need for immediate support. Again, we are at a point of how we resource that. And so that'll be another thing that project team will be talking about. And also we will be reaching out, obviously, to our Tigard Chamber of Commerce and Downtown Alliance to make sure that all voices are heard. We're also intending to loop in our community partners. We have many community partners who are already doing good work, and finding ways in which we can connect people with those resources as well. This is all intended. We're having our big kickoff in just about 12, 13 hours now, so we're very close, but I've heard what you said tonight, Councillor Goodhouse and other members of City Council and Mayor, and thanking Josh and Marnie again, and John as well. And we are moving forward on this with a sense of urgency, so thank you.
It looks like Chief McAlpine, do you want to add to that, or?
Yes, I would. Thank you. And it's just kind of calling out the obvious, but just recognizing that we have a sense of urgency in some parts of our city, and a plan that Washington County has thoughtfully laid out that would require possibly an appearance of lack of action, meaning sheltering in place, seeing where they fit in the scale and when we could get to those encampments. And those individuals may be causing the heartaches downtown away from their encampments. So I think we have to just recognize there's a sense of urgency, there is a process here, and how do we meld those two together? And as Josh and Marnie and John have talked about, is why they've asked for unified communication and that website so that we can direct our community and business owners to see what the process is, how we're going about it, that thoughtful, methodical way of doing things, and asking for a little bit of patience while still trying to address the urgency that we know is facing downtown. So it's a few juggling balls in place.
Thank you, Chief. Councillor Shaw, you've had your hand up a while. Is that your old hand or do you have a new hand? Do you have additional
No, that's
questions?
actually just, yeah, thank you, Mayor. It was a new question. I also note that Councilor Newton has her hand raised, so I'm happy to defer to her and then ask my question. I just have a funding question. But I'd like to defer to Councilor Newton if she'd like to ask hers first.
Okay. Okay. A couple of things. First of all, on the encampment program, are we talking about camps of multiple people? Are we talking about individuals? I'm a little bit confused on what you mean by an encampment, first of all. Second of all, a 12-month program, but then it sounds like you're flying the plane as you build it too. So I was a little bit confused about that. I get a little bit concerned that we not get overly deliberate when we've got some immediate things happening. And then to follow up on what the chief said, I know that sometimes the biggest issue folks have with the encampments is the behavior outside of the encampment. So that's a big problem for our community. So that's what really causes the problem. And the last thing I will say, since Director Bernard brought this up, I realize this isn't really directly related to the encampment. You know, I've been involved with the city of Tigard since 1980. And in the last month, I've heard more concerns about people no longer want to go downtown, too afraid to walk the Fano Creek Trail under the viaduct. And then another constituent called me, and I believe I passed this on to the chief. They were directed by their apartment manager that there were homeless people going door to door to ask for money and not to answer the door. My heart breaks for these individuals. I feel like what we want to try to do is get them services and housing. So that's really important. It's really critical when I see those folks. And then on the other hand, we've got this push-pull, as we've been talking about, in terms of our community, who tell me, I'm not uncompassionate, but this is hard. I've got small children and they're supposedly on our property. So, they're not unsympathetic. They're feeling bad complaining to me or saying anything because they want the people to get help. But I think that's where the push-pull is. So on the encampment, are you talking about groups or individuals? And what about the spillover behavior that's not everybody, but is an issue sometimes?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Newton, for those questions. So I think when we look at our assessment, we're looking at structures, because sometimes it's hard to know how many individuals could be potentially within a structure. But encampments come in different shapes and sizes. You see, sometimes it's 2 or 3 tents in a car. Sometimes I've seen encampments as big as 40, 50, 60, 70 tents, right, and automobiles. So the spillover behavior, that's where it's really crucial to have those partnerships with law enforcement, because when we're scoring our criteria, a lot of times crimes get attributed to an encampment, and that's not always the case. And so we have to really be thoughtful and deliberate about our approach, and that we're not criminalizing homelessness, but also recognizing, like you said, that if there are criminal activities taking place, that our law enforcement's involved, engaged, and understand how to work. And I don't know if Undersheriff can add to that piece.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. This is something we really want to be able to work with our different police departments in Washington County to help track, because a lot of times if a call comes in and it may be to a neighboring residents and may not get tracked back to the encampment if that's where the crime occurred. And so we're gonna have to do some working with our dispatch center to make sure that we're tracking all of that data and then getting it over to the appropriate folks to make sure that that gets included in the scoring.
And I know you said housing and services, which I'm so grateful that you tied us back to that, Council Newton. And that's really where the supportive housing services measures going to come to place. And our team, that's what the centralized point of contact on the encampments, they're going to be liaisoning with the supported housing services division, which is a separate division who is in charge of implementing that program. But they'll be liaisoning with them to ensure that we're doing that outreach, that we're engaging with these folks, trying to get them inside, get them connected to services, and get them permanently housed. And that is the goal here, is to get these folks out of street homelessness. And that's good for them, and it's good for our communities. And that's the goal that we're all aiming for here, I think.
All right, Councillor Shaw.
Great, thank you. And again, just want to say thank you very much to both for the presentation. And Josh, you'd mentioned the transparency, and thank you for the 12-month budget. Comes out to just approximately $2 million. And Marnie, you had mentioned on the last 3 encampments necessitated some urgency to remove them. Do we have a cost? And I know it's difficult because Josh, you've said it could be 5 people, could be 10, could be a car, but have we, for budgetary purposes, kind of estimated what a cost per encampment to remove is, and looked out over 12 months to see if we have enough money of that $2 million that will cover those expenses?
Well, that's why it's a 12-month pilot. That's what I'll start with. We have estimated costs based on other similar jurisdictions. So we've looked, most specifically at Portland, and then scaled it down quite a bit, because even though our problem is huge here, it's not Portland. And so we based some of those cost estimates on that. We've worked with our vendor to understand the cost, to get estimates of the cleanup costs. And so we are pretty hopeful. We feel pretty confident that those are the 12-month costs. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's also the reason that it's a pilot, because until we really start digging into this and learning the true costs of the cleanup in particular, it was our best guess based on what's happening in similar jurisdictions and in Portland.
Councillor Newton.
I guess the other thing, I know, sorry. I guess the other thing I wanted to ask about was, we've had situations where we've had to remove campers because they were in inappropriate locations, floodplain, sensitive lands, or whatever. So I'm assuming that if in an encampment, and I'm assuming the campers choose where they want to camp, I'm assuming if it's an inappropriate location for some reason, they would be noticed and removed.
That's on the scoring criteria you said, right?
Yes, we take environmental impacts, and so floodplains is one of those scoring criteria. And in the summertime, we're particularly worried about fire hazard. And so we're looking at humidity and dried brush, and are they, what are they using for heating, for cooking, those kind of things.
All right, any further comments or questions? Is there an actual ask of the Tigard Council today from our team? I know this was a presentation of a concept, but Director Bernard or City Manager Reimer, is there an ask?
Mr. Mayor and councilors, first, thanks to our county colleagues for your information today. Really, this was to provide a chance for the council to do what you just did, ask the questions, provide input. It was our intent that we would move forward with the county to start working regionally, as your goal states as well. So that's our plan moving forward. All of the comments and notes and questions obviously have been taken into account, and I know, as Marnie and others have said, this is really something that's a work in progress, though we all realize that we need action in different areas right now. So that was the ask, Mayor.
All right, thank you. And I want to thank Josh, and the undersheriff for coming and spending their time with us tonight and having a robust conversation. So thank you very, very much. And I'm going to move us on to our next agenda item, which is to receive an update on the American Rescue Plan Act. And City Manager Reimer, you are presenting with Management Analyst Hendricks, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good evening again, Mayor and councilors. I'm just going to kick this off, and this is our first report since we talked with you at the Budget Committee. And really, we want to talk about where we've invested our time. We have a few recommendations for our initial, albeit small, investments to start the process. And then, as important, discuss where we're heading and some of the conversations that we are having today, as well as any questions you may have or ideas that you have in terms of where investments should be placed, especially with the conversation that you just had. So Nicole's going to walk us through this, and then we're happy to answer any questions you may have or take the input that you want to provide.
Cool. Thanks, Steve, and good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Nicole Hendricks. I'm the Senior Management Analyst in the City Manager's Office here at Tigard. So as Steve mentioned, we will have an ask at the end of the presentation just to provide your input on our current planning efforts, and then also approve some recommendations for two potential projects. So as you probably already know, the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, as it's commonly referred to, is a $1.85 trillion federal package that funds response and recovery efforts to address the impacts of COVID-19. And ARPA's State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund is one of the many funds established as part of ARPA that provides governments funds to meet local needs for COVID-19 recovery. And some of the allowable uses for this fund includes responding to the public health emergency or its economic consequences, providing government services to the extent necessary because revenues have declined, to make necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband or infrastructure, and to support nonprofits that aid homeless, the homeless. And so I'm change the slide there. So as you can see on the right, this act includes funds for individual relief through those direct paychecks that a lot of us received, as well as grants to nonprofits and states. There's also funds that have been established for housing assistance, hunger relief, and other support through various programs. So some of these programs have been established and are available now, and others are still being set up, and our team is continuing to monitor and track these opportunities to ensure that our community members can have access to these other funds, and that we can also leverage our funding. So for example, we're currently working on an application for a fund that was created through ARPA called the Emergency Connectivity Fund, and that is to potentially support like laptop and router checkout program at our library. So we're currently trying to pursue other ARPA opportunities that are created. So as an eligible recipient of this program, Tigard will receive $7.49 million from the Department of Treasury, with the first half was actually received in June of this year, and the second half will be distributed in June of 2022. Right now, our efforts are really focused on our approach to investing these funds, and we've been having a lot of conversations with our community partners. As Councilor Newton mentioned earlier in the meeting, we had good conversations at the Community Roundtable last week, where we were hearing needs for housing support services, increased support to access available programs, and food access and mental health for high schoolers and our youth. So we are also talking with Just Compassion and our other nonprofits about what their needs are and where there are opportunities to potentially expand services or support their efforts as well. So we're continuing to see where there are opportunities to collaborate and provide funds, and this could end up looking like something similar to like another round of the RAFT program or something along those lines. So we'll continue to see what the community needs, but those conversations are happening. We're also coordinating with our neighboring cities and having a lot of conversations with the county What we know now is like we're still very early on in the process, and I think everyone's trying to get grounded in the Treasury's guidance. And so there's a lot more conversations to be had. The presentation from Washington County that you just saw is part of kind of those efforts through the ARPA funding. And while we're having conversations about what needs are now, we're also balancing that with potential future needs, since these funds are available for a longer period of time than like the CARES Act funds. And then as a side note, to date, we've provided about 5.9 million to the community in the form of business grants and loans, assistance for city fees and charges, help with nonprofits, and community resiliency and mental health. In terms of timeline, I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier. We're pretty early in the process and plan to approach kind of investment decisions incrementally over the next couple of years. So as we do, we are going to continue to talk to our partners and our community members and check in with council for recommendations as we develop and move on in this timeline. And as we've seen, COVID is still very prevalent, and we just want to ensure that we can respond to impacts down the line as well. So just key dates to note here is mainly that the funds must be obligated December 31st of 2024, and then we have to expend them by December 31st of 2026. And in addition, we also have our quarterly reporting that we will be doing as well. So we have 5 categories for our planning efforts, which are connectivity and access in underserved areas, housing and economic security, community resiliency plan, individual and family support, and sustaining city services. And we did adjust one of these categories based on the feedback we got at a budget committee meeting. So we replaced, there was a water infrastructure category, and we replaced that with the individual and family support category. And a lot of these categories were developed with these guiding principles, which include the council goals of community resiliency, COVID response, unhoused support, parks and recreation. And we're also thinking about our 5 E's and our imperatives. And so we have a lot of guiding documents that helped us develop those categories. We do have some more specific developments for each of these categories. So starting with the connectivity and access in underserved areas, our approach there is to, upon its adoption, have the Parks Master Plan kind of help inform our investments in this category. There's been tons of conversations and work done through that planning process to understand community needs. And so we will be looking to that plan to help guide investments in that category. We're also exploring the idea of a neighborhood fund to allow flexibility for community members to maybe apply for and determine what their needs are in their neighborhoods. And that's an idea being explored. And then another one is also researching what different equity leadership positions could be created to help move our values of equity and access forward. So that's just what we're kind of working on now. Nothing's final, but that's kind of the direction we're going. And then the second category is the housing and economic security. So as you've seen tonight, just that Washington County coordination, the nonprofit partnerships, and we have a recommendation later that will show you in this category as well. And then with community resiliency, so the way we're approaching this is it's a plan. 10% of the funds in this category would go towards plan development, and then the rest of it would go towards implementation of the plan. So we're excited about that. And then individual and family support, we are talking about how do we support childcare services or access to services and resources for families, and then also that technology component as well. And lastly, for sustaining city services, so the Treasury released calculations for how to determine the estimates that we need to create, and so our finance team is working on that. And we also are preparing ourselves for federal reporting, and our first report is actually due at the end of this month. So we're kicking it off pretty early, and we do have 2 recommendations for you tonight to consider. And so the first recommendation falls under that housing and economic security category. And that would be $25,000 for a mobile business incubator. And this is kind of modeled after our Opportunity Cafe in the library. And so it's for food-focused entrepreneurs that are impacted by COVID-19. The city did receive funds from Washington County and was awarded a grant from the AARP through a community challenge. So that funding can be matched with this funding. And if approved, the funding would allow for the acquisition of 2 mobile carts and entrepreneur recruitment, with the goal of kind of starting it up at Universal Plaza when it opens. So that's the first recommendation. And then the second one is the development of our community resiliency plan, which will identify existing efforts and opportunities, vulnerabilities and goals in addressing climate resiliency, with equity and environment at the focus of that. And responding to climate change also strengthens our overall public health. So the $125,000 would provide the necessary funds to enter into a contract for proposals if we're determined that that meets our needs. And then that remainder of funds would be for implementation. So as for next steps, like I mentioned, coordinating and leveraging partnerships and funding opportunities, making sure we're following Treasury guidance and working with our federal lobbyists to make sure we're following all of our rules, and then a phased implementation. So coming back to you with reports, with more recommendations, and taking this one step at a time. So with that, as we mentioned earlier, if you have any feedback on like current efforts for coordination and planning, feel free to let us know. And then also we are asking that you approve initial investments for that mobile business incubator and the climate resiliency plan. And before I open it up, Steve, do you have anything to add?
Nope, well said, Nicole, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I will add that we did, the city manager, management analyst Hendricks, and myself did have a meeting with the Treasury Department about our allocation. And I think at least I have a more clear understanding of how and why we were so impacted between our initial estimate we were given and our actual, and learned that we are the only jurisdiction in Oregon that had that kind of a difference. There was one other jurisdiction affected, but was a pretty small amount of money compared to our $4-ish million. So if people have more questions about that, either the city manager or I can probably answer those, but we don't anticipate that changing. We may make a case to the state. That was the suggestion from Treasury, but just as a follow-up on that. All right, so who's got questions or thoughts for the team? Council President Lube.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Nicole. I have a comment first, just voicing concerns for anything that is going to be an ongoing cost. I know you were talking about recruiting for a position, and I really just want to emphasize that it's my hope that these funds are used as one time. I know, we talk about budget issues and not having money for this and that, and I'm concerned about bringing on additional obligations when we're still trying to figure out how to pay for park maintenance and other things in our budget. And so it's my hope that these are one-time costs. And then I was hoping if you could go into a little bit more detail on the $2 million under sustaining city services, just some clarity under, what we're thinking that sort of area is, would be helpful to me.
You want me to take that, Nicole? All right, thank you. So under the sustaining city services, one of the allowable uses is to ensure that either funds, revenues that were not generated during COVID, or funds that you expended because of COVID. One of the main things about the bill was to allow cities to recoup those costs. And so we've done our initial calculations, which are much more than the 2 million that we have there. And so the thought would be, if there's key areas such as parks it's probably a smaller dollar amount in this, but you just even reference it as an area that has continual need, that we would look at potentially recommending a replenishment of some of the lost revenue in parks, for example, or if there's some additional expenses that we can account for that we would then move into the park fund that the council would have the discretion to use to improve a park, work on operations and maintenance. One of the things that I think a best practice that's slowly evolving is holding on making decisions like that, because we don't know the impacts to our community first, and if the funds are going to be necessary to first serve our community. Unfortunately, the resurgence of COVID right now is proving why I think it's wise to identify that as something that it's a goal of ours, but it would not be the #1 priority. So I may have given you a little more information than you'd asked for, but that was kind of the extent of what the Sustained City Services is.
Now that additional information and context is really helpful. Thank you, City Manager.
Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor. I had the same comment as Council President Lube about ongoing staff. Presentation we had early on from LOC was that wasn't recommended. And also another comment that was made was to, and you're probably doing this, was to make sure that we're working with other jurisdictions in the region and the state on broadband, because a lot of folks are working on that. So I'm assuming you're partnering with that. I'm mostly concerned about our residents and businesses. And I was hoping to see a recommendation that would revive the great work our team did initially with COVID for RAFT and the business assistance. I'm still hearing from a lot of folks that they're struggling, and to tell them that there's access on a website, they're overwhelmed. They just are overwhelmed. They've got kids, they just can't even think about it. So I'm concerned about that. I had a discussion with Pack with Pride, and their numbers for assistance are higher than they were pre-COVID. They're not as high as they were during the height of COVID, but they're really concerned about when school starts that their numbers are going to go way up. So Family Promise said, geez, if they could get some cell phones, that would help. So I would really like to see a recommendation early on that we go back to those organizations, those nonprofits that we contacted initially, that we gave grant money to start with, and get back to them now right away. I think that's important. I don't know how much it would be, but I would like to see that to be one of the recommendations. I think that's a priority for our community and also our business community. I don't know what's really going on with them, but I know, there's people still out there struggling. And then also we're talking about the conversation we just had. I know we've got a lot more folks without housing as a result of COVID, and folks on the brink of losing housing because of the rent eviction moratorium. So partnering with St. Vincent de Paul's rental assistance program, helping Just Compassion. I know they would like to get a staff person too. I don't know that we could do that funding, but anything that we could do that with them. So I'm more supportive of doing some of those things initially, since we do have time to allocate these funds to number one, help our business and community members, but also so they can see that's how we're investing this money. I mean, I think that's important. And then I guess I would also, I'm a little confused about the parks plan and how that connects to COVID recovery. That confuses me a little. So, and I mean, I think we do have some underserved areas, but I'm a little confused about how that connects. Thanks.
Nicole, maybe we can tag team on this. For clarification, Councilor Newton, on the local support, are you looking at to potentially allocate some funds now tonight, so then we would have the opportunity to move forward and actually distribute funds with some guidelines provided by the council, like the RAST program? Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
I think we'd be prepared to recommend that the council would allocate 150,000 or 200,000 from the Business and Housing Stability Fund. That would provide us that opportunity. We obviously would only make those investments after meeting with them and understanding the needs, but you've already referenced a few. Nicole, I know, has been having some conversations with Just Compassion, as she mentioned, And there's some opportunities potentially there, especially in light of the previous conversation we just had. So if you are thinking about that, that's something you may want to include in the recommendation this evening. For the Parks and Recreation, I think one of the things that communities across this country and probably the world have learned is that access to public space is an important part of our overall health and wellness. And so part of the conversations that we've been having are there some areas that are underserved or unserved that the council could make some investments in? And we want to use the Parks and Rec Master Plan as that guiding document prior to making any decisions like that. But it's really based on what public open space brings to a community and how that ties directly to the impacts that we've seen in COVID. So those are a couple of the questions. I may have missed a couple other comments. So Nicole, if you can help me out.
No, thanks. I think you got them all. I did want to make one more comment though that I remembered. The Youth Advisory Council is really interested in hosting a series of mental health workshops or summits. They're, you know, I've worked with them for years and I'm always thinking, okay, when they plan for their next school year, they're going to talk about the blanket drive and the Good Neighbor Center meals. No, this year it was their mental health. And so that struck a chord with me. And so another recommendation I would like to make is that we work with the Youth Advisory Council on developing that. I know Kent was at the meeting as well, so he can, Mr. Wyatt, so he can fill you in on that. But that's come up twice with that group. So I think that might be an important thing at least to explore. Thank you.
All right, Councilor Goodhouse.
I think Councilor Newton, for some reason, saw my notes because she read off pretty much everything I was going to say. I agree the same thing. When I'm looking at that list, especially the first two recommendations, you're doing a community resilience plan right now compared to all the items that Councilor Newton said. We need to do those others. You know, the resilience, I think you got later, but we have families or businesses. You know, both. I know one of the bullet points said families, but we have businesses that still, you know, paying rents are still catching up, or it's even hard to find, you know, staff after all this. So they might be trying to come out of it, but they can't really get back to where they were because they can't find the staff for the workers. So there's assistance for the businesses, kind of like what the Councilor Newton said, but also for these nonprofits. They're still feeding people. They're still housing. People still need internet access to find jobs. All those things are still, you know, crucially needed. And I agree too, as well. You know, we might have some temporary funding for a position, but once we create that position, it's hard to kind of get rid of it. And I don't want to see us create a position off temporary funding. We've had that mistake before in the past with budgets or positions where we have some money, we get a position that we have to figure out how then we have to backfill or do that to keep that position in there. So I don't want to see any, you know, anything that's created from this. It's going to be a long-term thing that then the city with our limited budget is going to have to take over. But I see that, you know, the whole point I see of this money was to take care of what happened from the pandemic. And I think we need to look at all those issues that are affected and we're still dealing with. I mean, you know, the announcement coming out tomorrow with, you know, going back to masks, that, you know, that's going to start affecting some businesses, like it or not. That's going to start affecting gyms. It's going to affect other businesses starting tomorrow, that people wearing masks are going to stop going into some of those businesses. I know, talking to a couple of different gym owners, you know, they finally, their numbers are starting to go back up, but the only reason was because there was no mask mandate. You know, they're going to see those go back down. And I don't know what other businesses are going to be affected by this, or households, or people, or if people, you know, with the numbers going up, people might not be going back out, maybe decide not to work. So there might be additional assistance they need. So that's where I really want us to focus on with that money right now.
Youth Councilor Nog, you have been quiet, and so has Councilor Shaw.
I don't have that much to add, but I think the money going towards nonprofits like Pact with Pride is a pretty good idea. I've worked with Pact with Pride. I can tell that it's a pretty, like, it's a great organization, and they've been reaching a lot of communities, and I've personally helped them give out boxes before, and it's a bit hectic, but it gets the job done. And I think, like, community-based organizations right now are really important.
Thank you. Councilor Shaw, anything?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I support staff's recommendation that was proposed. I do think there's a lot more to Councilor Newton's point that we could be doing. I'm a little nervous that we're doing it on the fly now, though I do think our residents and businesses do need help. So not sure if it makes sense now to like list everything we'd each like to have funded or to have staff come back with recommendations. So perhaps look to City Manager Steve Reimer or gosh, Nicole, I just realized I don't know your exact title. I apologize. I'll write it down next time.
Senior Management Analyst. I'll help you.
Thank you, Mayor. So leave that to you both. My apologies, Nicole.
So Councilor Shaw, you would be more comfortable with a proposal coming back in a week or, well, I guess it sounds like it might be 2 weeks, but in a couple of weeks with details about what staff would recommend spending somewhere in that couple $100,000 range or up to that amount, but you'd want to see a proposal.
I definitely would when it gets to working in nonprofits and others, though I do want to recognize Councilor Newton's point that and similar to aid and RAF, that those things that if there's immediate need now, we should do that. But if not, I'd prefer waiting.
Councilor Newton.
I hear what you're saying, Councilor Shaw. My thought was that we would go out to the same groups and ask them, what they would spend the money on. So we do kind of the same grant kind of, we wouldn't just decide here, we're going to give so-and-so one group this much, another group, but if you would prefer to do it that way, but I hear you. I mean, I would want them to, like we did last time, submit some request after we contacted them. This is what we would use the dollars for. And if it meets, general provisions that the staff had in place last time, I'm thinking we just use the same system. But if you would prefer to have a proposal come back, I'm fine with that too.
We got to remember Councilor Shaw was not here for that whole process too. So just as a reminder, there was some process, Councilor Shaw, but it was, and there was some criteria, but that was before your time, unfortunately. Okay, do we have other questions, or does someone want to, are we looking for a formal motion or just head nod as to where we're headed? What are we looking for, staff?
Mr. Mayor and councilors, we'd be looking for a motion to approve the 2 initial investments, as well as if there's any additional investment that you'd like us to make in those categories.
All right, would someone like to make a motion?
I guess a comment is, do we need to vote right now, or we don't have a meeting next week? But I was going to say, we threw out a bunch of different options and funding amounts. So I don't know if on the fly, as it was mentioned, if we want to pick the amounts of what we want to go to, or if we come back with what some of those amounts could be in different areas. Because I see housing and economic security, but then punting the community resilience plan part to later and looking at the nonprofits and the businesses and our residents and what we can do for those funds. So I don't know if we want to try to put pen to paper and figure out those numbers, or what we want to do.
Well, I think the staff should at least comment on the reason their timing is recommended. I would guess there's a desire to get moving on the community resiliency plan. I'm going to guess whether we approve the business incubator now or in 2 weeks probably doesn't matter a whole lot. And then the point about the timing on the meeting in 2 weeks is also, unless something's changed, is overscheduled for topics and was significantly overscheduled even a couple of weeks ago. So City Manager Reimer, is there anything that's come off that agenda that I haven't noticed yet, or can we really get another 20-minute conversation about this back on that agenda?
I believe we do have some time in the agenda. I don't have it in front of me. Carol could maybe check quickly as well, if she wouldn't mind. So yes, and then if I could just respond to Councilor Goodhouse's comment. So we don't see the 2 recommendations that we're making competing with the other items. We see them as separate. And so we would ask that you consider those recommendations so we can move them forward. The resiliency plan is going to take some time, And I know there's already an antsiness to be bold and to start making some of those investments. And so we would ask that. And we'd be happy to spend the next couple of weeks going out to the nonprofits again, asking them exactly what some of their needs are, how they would be serving our community, and come back to you in 2 weeks if we can make it in that 2 to 3 weeks, I guess, to have those answers for you.
Well, we may find out that 200,000 isn't enough for what's out there too. I mean, I know City Manager Reimer was kind of putting a number out there, but I would suggest that we do a more robust needs assessment than just kind of that best guess. Council President Lube, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to agree that I think we should move these 2 items forward and request that, you know, our team members come back to us with asking our community what they need, and we can approve the plan moving forward at a later date.
Are you making that as a motion?
I move to approve the use of ARPA funds for a launch pod business incubator for $25,000 and a community resiliency plan for $125,000.
And I'll second that.
Sorry, Councilor Newton, you would like to speak?
Yeah, really quick. I'm nervous about the timing on coming back for the other. These organizations, these folks in our community, I don't mean to be so, but 3 weeks, a month, I'm really nervous. And that's why I was sort of hoping that we could do something tonight. I understand that probably would be helpful to think this through, but I'm nervous about moving anything else forward without knowing for sure that we're going to be able to consider this as quickly as we can, because I'm hearing from a lot more people that I'd like to about how much they're struggling. So I'm going to say that, but I think it's urgent that we get something going on this, and also dealing with some of the issues we're having with our unfortunately homeless residents. I just think we've got some really urgent community issues that we need to be paying close attention to.
So there's a motion that's been made in a second. Would you like to offer an amendment that includes that, Councilor Newton?
Well, sure. I guess my amendment would be that we have consideration for the assistance for our community and business members at our August 24th meeting.
Okay, so you don't want to you're not proposing that we authorize $200,000 tonight. You're proposing that it come back at a date certain time on August 24th?
4th, correct.
Okay. Is there a second to the amendment?
I'll second it.
Okay, the amendment's been seconded. I think we need to act on the amendment first, if I'm remembering my parliamentary procedure here. So, and we're at roll call vote. So, let's see. City Recorder Krager, are you ready to take some votes here?
Yes, so you're voting on the amendment?
The amendment first, yes, please.
Yes, Councilor Shaw,
Yes.
Mayor Snyder,
Yes.
Councilor Goodhouse,
Yes.
Councilor Newton,
Thank you, yes.
Council President Lube.
Yes.
Okay, the amendment passes. Let's now vote on the primary motion.
Councilor Shaw,
Yes.
Mayor Snyder,
Yes.
Councilor Goodhouse,
Yes.
Councilor Newton,
Yes.
Council President Lube.
Yes.
Okay, original motion and amendment pass unanimously. Thank you. Staff, anything further, or do you have what you need?
We have what we need. I did get the report that we have probably a little over 30 minutes available on the 24th. So.
Okay, excellent. And you may want to look at balancing that and the action on homelessness. So you may have some competing interests for that time, but I think that's important. Okay, we'll move on to item number 6, which is a legislative public hearing. Consider an ordinance repealing Tigard Municipal Code Chapter 9.04. I will open the public hearing. Let's see, anyone that wishes to testify may do so by calling on the phone at this time to get in the queue. The phone number is 503-966-4101. City Attorney Rahala, staff report, please.
Good evening, Council. It's been a while since you've had a code cleanup ordinance, and that's exactly what this item is before you tonight. Tigard Municipal Code Chapter 9.04 has largely been superseded or made redundant by other actions you've taken over the past year or so regarding parks and conduct on city property. So in discussion with the city's parks manager, we have concluded that this is no longer helpful. The conflicts are either problematic or not necessary. So we are proposing to just repeal Chapter 9.04 and defer to the other sections of the existing code. So I can answer any questions.
All right, any questions of staff? We are in a public hearing, so need to limit this to questions to begin with. Council President Lube.
Thank you. I have just a general, I guess, kind of question, because Chapter 9.04 is talking about sort of facility reservations, and it looked in the notes that the referencing for making reservations and stuff is repeated or applicable under city use of city property and public right-of-way for special events, and it talks about permits for special events. And so are we equating with like renting a gazebo in a park with a special event permit that they would then have to go through?
So it depends. We do have specific park rentals. So if it was like a rental for a picnic or something, a family picnic, that would be through a general park reservation, and we have a separate system for that. If it was something like a larger event, like back in the days when we used to have races at our parks and would have large organized events that would rent the entire park, including a number of the gazebos and stuff, then that would be through a special events permit. So we have the two types of systems. Neither one of them is the process utilized by 9.04.
Perfect. That was my concern. It just felt it would be overly cumbersome to have somebody who just wanted to rent a picnic table going through special event permits. Thank you.
All right. I don't believe we had any public comments. City Recorder Krager, can you confirm that? Any written public comments, that is?
There were none.
Mr. Nollup, are there any callers in the queue?
Mr. Mayor, no callers this evening.
Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Council consideration of ordinance number 21-15.
I move to approve ordinance 2115.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? City Recorder, please read the number and title of the ordinance.
Ordinance number 21-15, an ordinance repealing Tigard Municipal Code Chapter 9.04.
And City Recorder, roll call vote, please.
Councilor Shaw.
Yes.
Mayor Snyder.
Yes.
Councilor Goodhouse.
Yes.
Councilor Newton.
Yes.
Council President Lube.
Yes.
All right, ordinance 21-15 is adopted unanimously. Thank you, City Attorney Rahala, for your continued work to clean up our code over the many years that we've been doing this now. Someday we'll start all over and continue cleaning it up again. Right? Like this honestly will never end, but hopefully one day we'll get to a point where we don't have silly things in it anymore.
Exactly.
By that I mean, well, yeah, by that I mean things, we haven't done in years or are totally outdated. All right, let's move on to item number 7, consider resolution adopting council ground rules. City Manager Reimer.
Thank you. Good evening again, Mayor and councilors. Right now, everyone has blue shading to them, so if my screen goes black on me, you'll know why I stopped talking. Tonight, we're asking you to consider your ground rules. As you all recall, during March of this year, the council came together with the leadership team in a facilitated manner to talk about your goals for the year, which we've talked about extensively tonight, as well as creating a new team agreement, which you've already adopted, the new community promise or the 5 E's. And the one outstanding item that we had was to create new ground rules. Your historic document ended up being many pages in length, and it sounds like it's just added on to year after year after year. And all of you concluded that a new document, a couple pages long, is what you're looking for. So we've been spending the last few months working on that. I've been having individual conversations with each of you, and tonight we're presenting the ground rule document that is really a partner document with your team agreement. And so both of those are in the packet tonight because they really do go hand in hand. And so tonight we're asking you to consider your ground rules, which we believe meets the needs and the conversations that you had in March, as well as in meetings after that, as well as individual conversations. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this point.
I feel like this is coming to a council meeting, but each one of us has seen many drafts and provided lots of input. So for the public, I think it's important to note that if there's not a lot of conversation or discussion, it's because this has been worked pretty hard already. So, but there still may be some questions or comments. Otherwise, a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
I can
it's
make a motion.
I just wanted to say something
Sorry,
really
Councilmember.
quick. I just really appreciate the brevity of these, because the last few that we've had, as City Manager Reimer commented, kept getting added to, and this is well done, and I appreciate the brevity, and I think the team agreement is important too. So thanks.
And Councillor Shaw, you'd like to make a motion?
Yes, Mayor, I would like to make a motion that we adopt the new city council ground rules.
And that is, I think, resolution 21-30, correct?
Correct. I'm sorry. Yes, 21-30.
I'll second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Any final discussion? City Recorder, please read the number and title of the resolution.
Resolution number 21-30, a resolution amending the council ground rules and superseding resolution number 19-08.
And City Recorder, a roll call vote.
Councillor Shaw,
Yes.
Mayor Snyder,
Yes.
Councillor Goodhouse,
Yes.
Councillor Newton,
Yes.
Council President Lube.
Yes.
All right, resolution 21-30 is adopted unanimously. Thank you very much, and City Manager Reimer and the entire team that worked on those. Thank you for all the effort. I know that was not easy in getting 16 or 17 pages down to the vital few things was quite a task. And council, thank you for engaging on that. I know we had a lot of back and forth, and I think we got to a great place for our team for the next couple of years. See, we had no non-agenda items. City Manager Reimer, do you have an administrative report?
Yes, I do, Mayor and councilors. I want to start by thanking the county for coming forward tonight, as well as our team for participating. I know the council, we're going to have continued conversations, but I think it's important to recognize when you adopted your goal, you realize that we very much had to have the person-centric and regional approach, and this is really a start of it. I know we all want to get some immediate actions as well, but I think it's a good start to what we're doing. And to Councillor Shaw's comment about bringing the task force back, one of the key things in your goals was to reignite our efforts, and I know that Halstead and the chief and Kathy and others will be engaging in those conversations with you and others on how we move forward as a community with council as part of that as well. On that note, a couple of things, two things that we've talked about probably more than we thought we would is the resurgence of COVID again, as well as cooling centers. And I'll start with COVID. As you know, effective last Tuesday, we put into requirements of wearing masks regardless of vaccination status in our city facilities. And as you've seen, almost hourly, it seems like daily, but sometimes hourly, things are changing quickly with our county as well as the state and even national conversations on that. And so I know that it was referenced already that tomorrow the governor is going to be having some press conference on the potential for requirement of masks. And so we're just paying attention to that. And also as a team, we've been spending a lot of time on making sure that it's not just masks, but the social distancing requirements are very important, as well as the conversation and expectation of hygiene and sanitation. And so unfortunately, it's many conversations that everyone here has had multiple times, but we're kind of back to that same spot in some ways. I think I just read the stat that our hospitalizations are at the highest level they've ever been, and the second highest was in November of 2020. So it really gives that perspective of where things are heading right now, even with many of us receiving the vaccination already. So we will continue on that. And part of the emphasis I want to make is we had talked about in-person city council meetings starting September 7th. We also have events planned, and we're really taking the next couple of weeks to assess where we go or where COVID goes, and then making a recommendation on the in-person or hybrid city council meetings, as well as in-person boards and commissions. And so more to come on that. The cooling centers as well. We've had a hot summer, as all of you know. I heard Councilor Newton talk about her friends visiting from Bellingham, saying it's always hot when they come, so it's not going to be any different this time, I guess. But the cooling centers will be open throughout the county. We just got word late today, that there'll be a couple 24-hour centers as well. I believe in Beaverton and Hillsborough, the county has partnered up with those cities and others to assist in 24-hour cooling centers. We also will have our cooling centers open Wednesday through Saturday here, the library 10 to 6, as well as the senior center from 5 to 8. And so we'll continue to monitor the weather as well and do what we can to continue to serve our community. Just a couple of other notes. Our Park and Rec team met with Metro last week to do basically a walk and talk tour of some of our planned developments with our local share funds, areas like Steve Park, the library backyard, Cook Park, accessible playground, and other areas, just so Metro could really visually see where we'll be making our applications, which hopefully will lead to some IGAs for all of us to consider with funding coming our way. It's also that would play into our ARPA conversation. One of our goals is to leverage funds. And so if we do have ability to leverage our local share funds with potentially ARPA funds and some other funds, that's how we can get some of these park projects done that maybe, or not maybe, have always been sitting there waiting for the day. So hopefully we can start to see that. Other than that, the number that I've been talking about every week so far, because of Halstead's great reporting, is how many students took place in the summer reading program, and it ended up being 2,188 students. So yeah, it sounds like the community really came together in that, and obviously another great need in that area. Also, the library is working, I believe, across the county on improving our Spanish collections and access to our Spanish collections. So great to hear that. And then finally, our podcasts are continuing to be popular. Youth Counselor Nog, I know you recently did one on why you applied to be a youth counselor, which is awesome. Just Compassion talked about the receipt of some of the state ARPA funds that we may be able to leverage with them from an operational standpoint. And the team has shared with me that more than 6,000 community members have downloaded at least one episode. So it's gaining traction, and our community is listening and seeing value in our podcasts. And that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager Reimer. We do not have an executive session tonight. Is there a motion for adjournment?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, roll call vote, please.
Councilor Shaw,
Yes.
Mayor Snyder,
Yes.
Councilor Goodhouse,
Yes.
Councilor Newton,
Yes.
Council President Lube.
Yes.
All right, we are adjourned. Good night, Tigard.
Night, Tigard.
Good night.
Tigard.
Good night, everybody. Good night.